Hello, everybody. All right, welcome to the Mikestand. Today, of course, is Thursday, June 12th, 2025. Of course, before we get into everything, we're going to, of course, give people a chance to show up. Hopefully, you've all had a good week this far. Actually, I do need to step away from the computer for a moment here, so I'm going to put some music on while I'm gone, and then I will be right back. All right, I'm back. So hopefully everybody's having a good week, as I said. So now we got three. Well, we had three people, I guess. And we're coming up on 3 minutes here, so I guess I'll talk about what's on tap for tonight. So, so tonight we do have one article we're going to go over from Bounding into Comics, where they did an interview recently with Donny Cates, where he basically is slamming Marvel Comics' refusal to let Spider-Man grow up. And in quotes here, he calls Captain America a Nazi, and Peter can't have a kid. So he's got a few issues with Marvel, I guess, in their creative direction. So we're gonna take a look at Donnie's views on all that. We'll also, of course, we'll have the wrestling wrap up, where we'll look back to last night's AEW summer blockbuster events on both Dynamite and Collision. As for, I think, the second week in a row, they actually had both Dynamite and Collision on the same night, instead of recording Collision for Saturday to be aired on Saturday. And we'll look ahead to tonight's TNA Impact as well. Aside from that, of course, and after that, we'll wrap up the show with This Day Meets History. So, with all that being said, why don't we go ahead and get started here? Let me go grab the article. Here. And as always, guys, if you guys haven't already, you guys can help out by liking and sharing the stream. See if we can get some more friendly people in here to engage. That'd be appreciated. Also, if anything here grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions. I'll try to answer the questions to the best of my ability. So, with that being said, of course, let's get into this. So, former Venom writer Donny Cates slams Marvel Comics' refusal to let Spider-Man grow up. And in his quote here, Captain America was a National Socialist, and Peter can't have a kid. Unquote. Peter can't have a kid? All right, so let's take a look here. Like most everyone else who has either read or worked on the Wall Crawler's more recent print adventures, former Venom Volume 4 writer Donny Cates is not a fan of Marvel Comics' continued insistence that of all the medium's costumed characters, from Captain America to Superman, Spider Man is the only one who is not allowed to experience any sort of lasting growth, character development, or status quo shakeup, which has been getting talked about a lot lately. Kate, who also wrote runs on Hulk Volume 5 and Thor Volume 6, before a near fatal car accident brought his comic book career to a sudden but temporary halt, shared his frustration with Marvel Comics editorial during a recent interview given to Pop vs. Dave Buesing. Amidst a discussion on his now abandoned pitch for Ultimate Spider-Man Volume 3, which he was originally tapped to relaunch before his accident took him off the board, Kate noted that, similar to the book's current direction under Jonathan Hickman, quote, my entire pitch for, in brackets, Ultimate Spider-Man, was that people want him to be married, to have kids, unquote. Quote, do it for them, unquote, he exclaimed. Quote, what are we doing here? There's an entire contingent of people screaming for him and Mary Jane, unquote. Which is true, which goes totally against the grain of what we've been talking about with Tom Brevoort, who just keeps insisting on, Spider-Man not being there. All right, I was unaware that I got cut off. Sorry about that. Um, I guess I'll have. I guess. Um, I guess I don't know how much. Yeah, I just hate. All right, so let me start over again. Unfortunately, because I don't know how much of what I read there you guys caught. So I'll just start over. Um, start over here. Hopefully, whatever caused me to get kind of cut off there in the first place with StreamYard won't happen again. So, former Venom writer Donny Cates slams Marvel Comics refusal to let Spider-Man grow up. In quotes here, he says, Captain America was a National Socialist, and Peter can't have a kid. Article by Spencer McCauley, published June 12th, 2025. All right, so like most everyone else who has either read or worked on the Wallcrawler's more recent print adventures, former Venom Volume 4 writer Donny Cates, not a fan of Marvel Comics' continued insistence that of all the medium's costume characters, from Captain America to Superman, Spider-Man is the only one who is not allowed to experience any sort of lasting growth, um, character development, or status quo. Kate, who also wrote brief runs on Hulk Volume 5 and Thor Volume 6, before a near-fatal car accident brought his comic book career to a sudden but temporary halt, shared his frustration with Marvel Comics editorial during a recent interview given to Pop vs. Dave Busing. And again, if you guys can help out by liking and sharing the stream, see if we can get some more friendly people in here, that'd be appreciated. Also, if anything here grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions. I'll try to answer the questions to the best of my ability. So with that being said, let's continue on here. So amidst a discussion on his now abandoned pitch for Ultimate Spider-Man Volume 3, which he was originally tapped to relaunch before his accident took him off the board, Cates noted that similar to the book's current direction under Jonathan Hickman, my entire pitch for in bracket Ultimate Spider-Man was that people want him to be married, to have kids, unquote. Quote, to it for them, unquote, he exclaimed. Quote, what are we doing here? There are an entire contingent of people screaming for him and Mary Jane, which, as I was saying before I realized I got cut off, that the sales numbers are showing that is true. Despite Tom Brevoort just totally, just utterly saying no, 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 no. I know sales numbers better than most people. No, that's just that. But anyways, quote, do it for them, unquote. He exclaimed. Oh wait, actually, we already read that part. Quote, it's like we have a Chili's. You have people screaming for ice cream. In brackets, and Marvel Comics is saying, quote, in smaller quote, no, bleep you, we don't have ice cream, unquote. Cates added, quote, it's like, in brackets, it's like, in smaller quotes, sell ice cream. What the bleep's wrong with you? Well, or what you could do, what a lot of people have been doing, is you could say, well, you don't serve ice cream. I want ice cream, so I'm going to go where they sell ice cream. Kind of what they're doing with, instead of reading the main title, the Amazing Spider-Man title, they're just going over to Ultimate Spider-Man and spending their money there. Let's see now. All right, so thus far everything is okay. To this end, the King in Black event architect then explained that Marvel's refusal to roll back the events of One More Day stemmed from the fact that the publisher, quote, doesn't want to give him kids and a wife because the character is evergreen, unquote. Okay. Quote, eventually when you give him the wife and kids, eventually what's going to happen is either he's going to have adult kids and you have a grandfather as Spider-Man, or he's going to lose a child, or he's going to get a divorce, unquote. Cates detailed. Quote, that's their reasoning. That taints Spider-Man over time, unquote. Well, okay, as for he's going to get old and you're going to have an old Spider-Man. You know how you remedy that? Maybe the kids take on the mantle, or maybe the kids become heroes in some way. When the kids become adults, maybe they follow in their father's footsteps. Maybe they don't have the powers he does, but maybe they decide to go either into crime fighting themselves, develop a cause, or maybe even go into any of the other aspects of his life. Whether he's becoming a teacher or a reporter or what have you. However, while and of course the tragic aspect of it too, of the whole divorce or anything like that. Well, you already did the whole divorce. Well, you kind of did somewhat the divorce or the well, you didn't, losing a child. He already has that tragic element with losing his uncle. Now, granted, losing a child is probably not quite the same as losing an uncle, but losing somebody you love, generally speaking, is a pretty tragic event. And then, getting a divorce, you kind of did that in a way, without the whole divorce proceeding with one more day, which a lot of people didn't like. So, however, while the publisher's editorial team may believe keeping the web slinger in a state of arrested development is the sole way to keep him relevant to newer readers, Kate argues that this reasoning is not only disingenuous, but outright BS. Quote, my argument would be he killed Gwen Stacy like a year into it, unquote, said the Absolute Carnage Volume 1 scribe. Quote, he broke the bleep, he broke the bleep's neck. He's okay. He's been divorced. All these things have already happened, unquote. Mm-hmm. Quote, the way that I think of these characters, and this is Donnie speaking again, of course, is that you don't honor these characters by treating them as fragile, unquote. Kate asserted, quote, I think it's our job as the inheritors of the legacy of these characters to try to break them as hard as you can. And it's only in doing that that they will show you how strong they are, unquote. Putting a stamp on his pushback, the Marvel Comics alum ultimately declared, quote, look, every character survived the 90s. They can't be broke. If we didn't bleep up bleeping mullet Spider-Man dying, coming back, quote, and I mean Cap was a National Socialist, and Peter can't have a kid, unquote, conclude Kate. What are we doing here? What are we doing? Just say you don't want to do, in brackets, it. That's fine, unquote. And that's all for that. That's all for the article tonight. The one main article we're going to do tonight here. Now, now of course I'm going to move on to the wrestling. Unless you guys have something else you want to talk about, we will probably just move on to the wrestling wrap up here. Get caught up on last night's AEW. AEW double dose of shows of Dynamite and Collision, as well as look ahead to tonight's TNA and possibly Ring of Honor action as well. Anyways, yeah, one of the cartoons I did see today, when I did get a chance to finally break away to watch some of my cartoons, was the first in the Gandy Goose series from Terry Toons. That was a pretty interesting watch. All right, so on last night's Dynamite, which was held from the last night's Dynamite and Collision were both held from the Theater of the Clouds at Mocha Center in Portland, Oregon. as, of course, AEW is continuing its build towards its All-In pay-per-view coming up on Saturday, July the 12th. And matches you already have set up for. We'll talk a little bit more about that. The opening match of the evening saw a very intense battle between Swerve Strickland and Will Ospreay, who went to a 30-minute time limit draw. This is a match that was set up last week as Ospreay wanted to try to quote unquote knock some sense into Will Ospreay wanted to knock some sense into Swerve, getting him to realize that Jon Moxley is the enemy, even though despite Swerve's past with Adam Page, trying to get Swerve and Hangman Adam Page to set their own personal issues aside to go after the common enemy, which is AEW World Champion. Now, after the match, of course, they were Swerve and Ospreay were both attacked by the executive vice presidents, the Young Bucks, Matthew and Nicholas Jackson, who attempted to super kick Swerve with tacks in their shoes, only for Will Ospreay to take the super kick, take the brunt of the super kick, protect him. Later on, as Ospreay was being attended, with Swerve Strickland in the room there was a bit of an exchange outside of the medical area where Adam Page had confronted the Young Bucks, telling them to basically stay out of his business, stay out of Swerve's business, stay out of Ospreay's business. As, of course, Prince Nana was sitting there eavesdropping on them. He went back and asked, "So you hear what he said?" So we'll see how that alt story plays out. As, of course, Swerve, as Adam Page is, Hangman Adam Page is set to challenge Moxley at All In for the AEW World Heavyweight Championship. Moving on to the next match, Mystico defeated Blake Christian in just under 5 minutes in a segment that was eventually set up for a potential match involving Mystico and MJF on next week's Dynamite, as MJF came out to confront Mystico along with the rest of the Hurt Syndicate. As things got a little hairy there, MJF attempted to take a swing at Mystico. Mystico caught it, applied back, and that led to a 3-on-1 attack on Mystico from the Hurt Syndicate, only for Jet Speed to come out to save Mystico from the beatdown, or Jet Speed of the Jet, Kevin Knight, and Speedball Mike Bailey, along with Mascara Dorado, who are coming out also for their upcoming trios match against the Hurt Syndicate of Shelton Benjamin, Bobby Lashley, and MJF. A match in which the Hurt Syndicate won. As Jet Speed is looking to get a World Tag Title shot against the Hurt Syndicate. So some other matches were set up for next week's throughout. And the main event on Dynamite saw a women's tag team match in which TJ J. Anna Jay and Ty Mello, who of course made her return to AEW last week after a nearly 2-year absence due to, of course, pregnancy. She was on having her first child with Sammy Guevara. In her first match in AEW in 2 years, she and Anna Jay defeated Megan Bayne and Penelope Ford as Megan Bayne, as Ty Mallow stood up to Bayne, basically telling her, "Hey, look, I'm not afraid of you." And so that's all that happened there. Now, a couple other big things that happened on the show as well, as a contract signing for a match between Kenny Omega and Kazuchika Okada happened. The contract signing for their match coming up at All In, as basically a new title will be established with kind of the merging of the as Kenny Omega is currently the AEW International Champion, and Kazuchika Okada is currently the AEW Continental Champion. A new title, the AEW Unified Champion, in which the two belts are basically going to be unified, has been christened and crowned at All In. The winner of the match basically not only wins both belts, but wins the new belt, the unified belt. Now, granted, I would have thought, now maybe it's because they don't want to run afoul of the WWE or whatever, but I would have thought, if you're going to unify the belts, the best name to give it would be the Intercontinental Champion. Kind of combining, making international and continental the portmanteau right there, right? Maybe they should have called it, but maybe because they didn't want to run afoul of the WWE or get into more hassles with them, that's why they just said, well, we're not going to call it the Intercontinental title, we're going to call it the Unified title. So, also on the show, there was a confrontation, of course, between Hangman Adam Page and the Death Riders, as they were looking to beat him down, only for Page to be saved by the Ops, setting up some matches next week, and we'll get into all that in a few minutes here. So now that was what happened on Dynamite. So right after Dynamite, then AEW had Collision. Now normally they tape Collision. To air on Saturday nights, but in this case, they chose to air it tonight instead as part of their Summer Blockbuster event. So the opening match with, of course, Collision came from the Theater of the Clouds at Moda Center. Nigel McGuinness and Tony Schiavone on commentary. For the first match, joining them on commentary, Adam Cole as Kyle Fletcher with Lance Archer in his corner defeated Anthony Bowens with Billy Gunn in his corner. Then the non-title match, AEW with Mercedes Moné at ringside watching. Saw in a non-title match, AEW Women's World Champion Toni Storm defeat Julia Hart in a one-on-one match. Now, of course, Sky Blue came out with Julia Hart at the beginning of the match, but was thrown out after attacking Toni Storm before the match even got started, as Toni Storm was confronting Mercedes Moné, who was sitting there watching at ringside. The match did eventually lead to a confrontation between Toni Storm and Mercedes Moné. It did get physical, with Mina Shirakawa coming out to save Toni, and then for Moné to then attack Mina, get her out of there, and basically tell Toni, this title's coming home to me. So then the third match saw in a mixed 6-man tag match saw the kind of they call the reuniting of the conglomeration, as it were. Mark Briscoe teaming with New Japan Strong Openweight Champion Tomohiro Ishii and Willow Nightingale defeated Mansoor and Mason Madden of the M&M Collection and Taya Valkyria, who had Johnny TV in their corner. Then you had Ring of Honor World Champion Bandito defeat Beast Mortos in what was the standby match for the evening. Then you saw in her second match, Tekla, who made her debut, her in-ring debut in Stardom last week, and made her first appearance debut a couple weeks ago. She defeated Queen Aminata, going to 2-0 now. Tekla, of course, coming off her recent firing from Stardom after she attacked officials there, particularly the Stardom president, Toru Okada. Then the main event of the evening, so an 8-man tag match in which Hechicero teamed with 3 members of the Don Callis family of Josh Alexander, Lance Archer, and New Japan Never Openweight Champion Konosuke Takeshita, with, of course, Roppongi RPG in their corner, which they defeated Daniel Garcia and the Paragon of course, Adam Cole, Kyle O'Reilly, and Roderick Strong. Now, also from these shows last night, they set up a set of shows for next week's Dynamite. We'll take a quick peek at that. We'll talk a little bit about that here real quick. So coming up on next week's Dynamite, as it were. Now, next week's Dynamite will be another big event happening. As on next week's Dynamite, they'll be having Grand Slam Mexico from the Arena Mexico. I gotta wait a sec here, I guess. All right, coming from Arena Mexico next week in the Federal District of Mexico City, Mexico. The match is signed for. Oh wait, actually, that was the wrong one. All right, on TBS next week, Dynamite will be from Arena Mexico, Mexico City. They have 4 matches that they signed over this past week for that match, including a 12-man tag match in which TNT champion Adam Cole teams with Atlantis Jr., Ring of Honor World Champion Bandito, Brody King of the Hounds of Hell, Daniel Garcia, Templario will be facing off against FTR, Dak Harwood and Cash Wheeler, Hechicero, CML's Hechicero, and the Don Callis family members of Josh Alexander, Kyle Fletcher, and Konosuke Takeshita. In a match for the CMLL World Women's title is Mercedes Moné once again showing how greedy she is. Mercedes Moné will be challenging Zexis for the CMLL World Women's title, saying that Mercedes Moné is already the AEW TBS champion, as well as the British Rev Pro undisputed British champion and undisputed world champion, and has a shot at Tony Storm at All In. And then, as we were talking about earlier, Mystico will be taking on MJF. And then a 10-man tag, the Death Riders of Claudio Castagnoli, AEW World Champion Jon Moxley, and Wheeler Yuta team up with the Young Bucks of Matthew Nicholas Jackson to take on AEW's World Trios Champions of the Ops of Powerhouse Hobbs, Samoa Joe, and Katsuyori Shibata, along with Swerve Strickland and Will Ospreay. That's coming up next week on Dynamite, of course. So now, with that being said, of course, now we'll move on to what's going down tonight on Impact, on TNA Impact. As soon as I get there, of course. I went back too far there. All right, so on tonight's Impact, which will be coming from the Mullet Arena in Tempe, Arizona, with, of course, Tom Hannafan and Matthew Rainwalt on commentary. The tag team that was known as a former WWE Women's and TNA Knockouts Tag Team Champions, The Inspiration, Cassie Lee and Jessie McKay, who made their return to TNA this past Friday night's Against All Odds pay-per-view, will be taking their first match since they made their return. Will be taking on the team of Brittany Brooks and Missa Kate. Jason Hotch of the Good Hands of John Skyler in his corner will be taking on Leon Slater. The number one contendership 8-4-1 match for the TNA Knockouts world title, which is kind of, they start out, from what I understand, they start out in an eight person tag match, then go down to a tag match and down 8-4-1, or go down to a 4-way, and then one of the 4-way. Danny Luna, Rosemary, Tessa Blanchard, and Zara Brookside will be taking on Indy Hartwell, Jody Threat, Killer Kelly, and Tasha Steelz. Now, the 8-4-1 setup is they start out an 8-man tag match. The winner of the 8-man tag match the winners of the 8-man will then participate in a 4-way match, and the winner of that match will be deemed the number one contender. That's how the 8-4-1 format works here. So, and then the main event, we'll see in a tag team match the Hardy Boys of Jeff and Matt Hardy taking on First Class of AJ Francis and Casey Navarro. So that's all I got for the wrestling wrap up for you guys. Actually, some WWE news, it has been reported that Brie Bella made her return to WWE Nikki Bella made her return to WWE this past Monday, confronting Liv Morgan. There's some talk now that Brie might be joining her as well, as they may be setting up a possible match between the Bella Twins and current WWE Women's World Tag Team Champions Liv Morgan and Raquel Rodriguez of Judgment Day. So that match. So now that's all the wrestling news I got for you in terms of the wrestling wrap up. We'll of course have more. We'll have the results of Impact for you tomorrow night. Now, let's go ahead and, with today being Thursday, June the 12th, 2025, let's take a look back at this day in each history. History! So, let me just go through real quick here. 1, 2, 5, let's see, 20, and then 2005. All right. All right. So first, I'm going to head back to the year 2002. 23 years ago today, on this date in the year 2002. This day in the year 2002. The 605th issue of Adventures of Superman went on sale on newsstands from DC Comics. Sold for $2.25 for 32 pages. The title of the story was Syndication, written by Joe Casey, with Carlos Maglia doing the art, lettering done by Richard Starkings, colored by Rob Rio and Alex Bliert. So on this date, 23 years ago today, in 2022, the 605th issue of Adventures of Superman, which started out just simply as Superman, went on sale on this date back in 2002. Now getting ready to move on to the next piece of history. So we had 3 years here, as we now move on to the year 2005, 20 years ago today. On this date in the year 2005, WWE trying to bring back ECW, brought back did the event ECW One Last Stand pay-per-view, in which the main event was a tag team match between the Dudley Boys and the team of Tommy Dreamer and the Sandman, which Dudley Boys won. Two of the other matches included Chris Benoit versus Eddie Guerrero and Mike Awesome versus Masato Tanaka. So here's all went down, and of course the pay-per-view took place from the Hammerstein Ballroom in New York City. So we already mentioned that in the main event, the Dudley Boys defeated Tommy Dreamer and Sandman. Mike Awesome defeated Masato Tanaka. Chris Benoit defeated Eddie Guerrero. The recently passed Sabu, who just recently passed about a couple weeks ago. Sabu defeated Rhino on that show. In a three-way dance, Super Crazy defeated Tajiri, who is accompanied in the ring by the Sinister Minister, a.k.a. James Mitchell and Mikey Whipwreck, and Little Guido, who is represented by his other FBI members of Tracy Smothers, Tony Mamaluke, Big Guido, and J.T. Smith. The show opened up with, of course, Lance Storm defeating Chris Jericho. So that happened on 2005 is just so nice that we're going to hit it twice. As also on this date in the year 2005, as I pull it up, so the OVA, Puro's OVA, Bleach 13 Court Guard Squads on Maki, kind of a standalone little thing, was released on this date back in 2005. So 20 years ago today as well, from Studio Pero. Studio Pero released the Bleach OVA Omake, Bleach 13 Court Guard Squads Omaki. And the last piece of niche history that I got for you, since I, of course, pull that up here. On this date in the year, on this date 5 years ago today, back in 2020, Sony Picture Television's Crossing Swords premiered on Netflix, I believe. Yeah. No, on Hulu. Sorry, premiered on Hulu. Let's see. Crossing Swords is an American adult stop-motion animated sitcom created by John Harventine IV and Tom Root. Let's see. Crossing Swords follows Patrick, a good-hearted peasant who lands a coveted squire position at the royal castle. His dream job quickly turns into a nightmare when he learns his beloved kingdom is run by a hornet's nest of horny monarchs, crooks, and charlatans. Even worse, Patrick's valor made him the black sheep in his family, and now his criminal siblings have returned to make his life hell. War, murder, full frontal nudity. Who knew brightly colored peg people led such exciting lives? Alrighty then. So with that, I thank everybody for being here tonight. Hope everybody enjoyed the show. We'll be back here with more News tomorrow, and don't forget this Sunday I'll be joined by Apex from Apex Comics. We'll be looking back at Hey Metal, thanks for popping in there. We'll be looking back at comics went on sale in May of 1940. We'll be actually checking out Startling Comics #1 from Standard. At the time, I think known as Better Books or Nador or Pines or whatever. But with that, I thank everybody for being here, and I hope to see everybody back here tomorrow. Bye.